What does it take to shatter the soul of a nation? Not just to conquer its borders or seize its gold, but to extinguish the very sun of its identity. For 500 years, Jerusalem believed it was untouchable. They held the covenant, they held the law, and at their heart stood the temple, the golden navel of the world where God Himself deigned to dwell. They whispered a dangerous mantra: the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. They mistook a promise for a shield and obedience for a birthright. But as the sun set over the Judean hills in 586 BC, a shadow longer than any mountain fell across the gates. An empire of iron and astrology had arrived. Babylon wasn't just coming to kill a king, it was coming to kill a god concept. Today, we step into the smoke and the ruins to witness the ultimate collision between human arrogance and divine judgment. This is not just history. This is the anatomy of a collapse. Why the internal erosion? Before the first Babylonian ram ever struck the North Gate, Jerusalem had already fallen.
All roads lead
to understand
to this
the
point.
why, we must
Our
look past
target
the military
is
maps
Jerusalem.
and into the spiritual ledgers of the city. The theology of entitlement. The people had fallen into what theologians call temple ideology. They believed that because God's house was in their midst, God was a hostage to their safety. They practiced syncretism, a lethal cocktail of worshiping Yahweh on Sabbath while bowing to Baal and Asherah on Tuesday. Biblical evidence. The prophet Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, stood in the temple courts and shouted, "Do not trust in deceptive words and say, 'This is the temple of the Lord.'" Jeremiah 7:4. He warned that the heart of the nation was a den of robbers. The violation of the sabbatical year. From a legalistic standpoint, Israel had failed to give the land its rest for 490 years. According to 2 Chronicles 36:21, the exile lasted 70 years specifically to repay the land for the Sabbaths the people had stolen. The why was a debt of justice and holiness that had finally come due.
All roads lead to this point.
How? The psychological
target
siege
is
and the
Jerusalem.
theft of the future. Babylon, under Nebuchadnezzar II, did not use brute force alone. They used a sophisticated, three-wave strategy of cultural deconstruction. Wave 1, the intellectual drain,
You are no
605
longer called by your
BC.
father's names.
How do you
will
break
now
a
be
nation?
known as Nabuchodonosor,
You steal its brain.
Belshazzar, and Sinidin.
Nebuchadnezzar
That
didn't
is
kill
better,
the youth.
Eleazar.
He kidnapped the
Ensure
cream
the
of the
angle
crop.
of the stylus is
Daniel,
correct for the Dingir
Hananiah,
sign, like this.
Mishael, and Azariah. Daniel 1, 3-4. The strategy. He rebranded them. New names: Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. New language and new literature. This was a systematic attempt to overwrite their Hebrew operating system with a Babylonian interface. Wave 2, the economic hollow, 597 BC. 10 years later, Babylon returned. They took King Jehoiakim and 10,000 craftsmen and smiths, 2 Kings 24:14. They left only the poorest of the land. This ensured Judah could never forge weapons or rebuild walls. It was a lobotomy of the national infrastructure. Wave 3, the final fire, 586 BC. The final how was a 30-month siege. Archaeological evidence. The Lachish Letters, carbon dated to this exact window, contain frantic messages from Judean outposts. One letter reads, "We are watching for the signals of Lachish, for we cannot see Azekah." It captures the terrifying moment the signal fires of neighboring cities went dark, one by one, as the Babylonian tide rose. The breach. When the walls finally crumbled, Babylon did the unthinkable. They burned the temple. To the ancient mind, if a temple was destroyed, the god of that temple was defeated. This was psychological warfare on a cosmic scale. What was lost and what was revealed? What remained when the smoke cleared? A remnant. The destruction of the visible. The what was the total liquidation of the Jewish state. The Davidic monarchy was severed. The Ark of the Covenant vanished into the mists of history. The city was a heap of ruins, as lamented in the Book of Lamentations. The archaeological reality. The Babylonian Chronicles, cuneiform tablets housed in the British Museum, confirm these dates and the appointment of puppet kings like Zedekiah. Excavations in the City of David area reveal a thick layer of ash and Babylonian arrowheads, marking the exact spot where the defense failed. The spiritual revelation. But what was revealed was more important than what was lost. The people discovered that Yahweh was not a territorial deity. He wasn't tied to a zip code in Jerusalem. If he could send Babylon to punish them, it meant he was the Lord of Babylon too. It forced the transition from a temple-based religion to a word-based faith. Without a sacrifice to offer, they offered the sacrifice of praise and the study of the Torah. The architecture of character. The smoke over Jerusalem has cleared,
Receive this humble
but the heat of
offering
its
from my
fire still
heart,
warms the pages of
for
history,
I have no temple
offering
but
us a
this
blueprint
room.
for modern resilience. Whether you are a person of deep faith or a strategist of the soul, the fall of Jerusalem is a masterclass in crisis management and identity preservation. The lesson of the movable altar. The greatest tragedy of 586 BC was not the loss of a building. It was the realization that the people had turned
Comfort,
a relationship
yes, comfort my people.
into a relic.
Speak tenderly to Jerusalem.
Do not
and
mistake
cry
the
out to
map
her
for the
that
territory.
Her warfare is ended.
The temple was meant to be a map pointing
The
to
lesson
God.
is to not
Instead,
confuse the map
the people worshipped
with the reality
map.
of God.
In our modern lives, we often do the same. We trust our religious routines, our safe Christian bubbles, or our perfect theology. But when the Babylon of life, cancer, bankruptcy, or betrayal strikes, we realize that a form of godliness has no power. The sovereignty of the storm. We must learn that God is the Lord of the exile, not just the king of the coronation. If God is only with you when you are winning in Jerusalem, your God is too small. True faith is discovered when you realize that the same God who allowed the
Lord
walls
bless
to
thee
fall is
and
the one
keep
sitting
thee.
with you in the dust of the
He
ruins.
is teaching us the statutes and the
The
judgments.
power of the word. In Babylon, the Jews had no sacrifices, no priests, and no incense. All they had were the scrolls. It was in the silence of the exile that the Old Testament was curated and cherished. Lesson. When everything is stripped away, the only thing that remains is the truth you have hidden in your heart.
This
The
epic
art
poem
of stoic
tells of the Great
resilience
Flood.
and leadership.
Pay close
Even from a
attention
purely
to the symbols
secular
for the
or
gods
leadership
involved.
perspective, the Babylonian conquest offers three hard truths about human systems. The rule of the best. Notice that Nebuchadnezzar did not just kill his enemies, he assimilated their talent. This is a lesson in resource management. If you want to conquer a field, don't just destroy the competition. Understand their brilliance and incorporate it into your own system.
Look at this grain. Enough to feed
The
the city
fragility
for
of
months.
comfort.
Truly, we
Jerusalem
are invincible.
fell because it was fat and happy. They ignored the warnings because the markets were full. In business and in life, the moment you feel untouchable is the exact moment you are most vulnerable. Success breeds a blind spot that only a crisis can cure. Identity is your only true capital. The young men in Daniel's circle were given new names, new food, and new clothes. They looked like Babylonians on the outside, but they remained themselves on the inside. The lesson. Your environment will always try to rename you. It will try to tell you who you are based on your job title, your bank account, or your failures.
So we remember the words of the
If you do
covenant,
not have a
even
core
here in
identity
Babylon.
that is
Write this
independent of
down
your surroundings,
diligently.
you will eventually become a ghost of the system. The management of exile. Exile is a universal human experience. It is that gap between who you were and who you are becoming. Don't waste your crisis. The Israelites who survived were the ones who built houses and planted gardens in Babylon. Jeremiah 29:5. They didn't just wait for the trouble to end. They grew through the trouble. If you are in a season of exile right now, a job you hate, a city you didn't choose, don't just survive it. Colonize it. Build something there. The final verdict. Babylon thought they had written the final chapter. They thought that by burning the temple, they had burned the hope of a nation. But they forgot one thing. Fire doesn't just destroy, it refines. The walls of Jerusalem fell so that the heart of the people could rise. The war on God's people didn't end in a massacre. It ended in a transformation. 70 years later, a remnant returned, not with a sense of entitlement, but with a spirit of humility. They learned that you don't need a golden palace to find the Creator. You just need a broken spirit and a willing heart. What is your Jerusalem? What are the walls you've built around your life that you think can never be moved? What are the idols of comfort you've been protecting? History tells us that everything built by human hands will eventually crumble. But what is built in the soul is eternal. Don't wait for the siege to start before you examine your foundations. The challenge. If this journey through the ruins of Jerusalem has moved you, don't let the fire go out. 1. Subscribe to join us as we unearth more lost chapters of human history and divine strategy. 2. Comment below. What is the one wall in your life that you are afraid might fall? Let's start a conversation in the comments about finding strength in the middle of our own exiles. 3. Share this video. Send this to someone who feels like they are currently living in Babylon. Remind them that their story isn't over yet. Jerusalem fell. Babylon fell. But the word of the Lord stands forever. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay grounded, and keep seeking the truth behind the smoke.